It's system review time, and this is the Fairchild Channel F, or to be more specific in this case, it's the Fairchild Channel F Series 2, released in the UK as the Adman Grandstand video entertainment computer. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. There have been videos about this system uploaded to YouTube by both Gamester81 and Chipsturs, both very good videos. I highly recommend you watch those as well if you're into the Channel F. So, brief history. Home game consoles initially contained just one game or variations of that game. I think you know the kind of thing I mean. Pong. You had your basic tennis game, and then you had hockey, football, basketball, you name it, all crammed onto one system, minor variations. You'd flick the switches, get a variation. So anyway, in 1974, a company called Alpex Computer Corporation developed and patented a technology that enabled storage and play of games on ROM chips. And they put the ROM chips into cartridges. And the first system to make use of this was the Channel F. It's sometimes argued that the Magnavox Odyssey was the first cartridge-based game system, and that's true to some extent. But what they didn't do was use ROM chips. They didn't contain any programming code whatsoever on those cartridges. What they were circuit boards that reconfigured the hardwired programming that was on board of the console. Putting one of those cards in was effectively like flipping the dip switches on a Pong machine. So, yes, they used cartridges, but it wasn't the same thing at all. Right, so Fairchild Semiconductor. I've also found them named as Fairchild Camera and Instrument, so take your pick which one's the right name. They were one of the companies involved in the development of transistors. Their designer, Jerry Lawson, developed the Channel F, which was originally known as the Video Entertainment System, or VES, when it went on sale in 1976 for $170. They changed the name when Atari released the VCS because they felt the name was just too similar and it would cause confusion among potential buyers. In 1977, Atari released the VCS, and it had both better graphics and sound, and it was basically hammering the Channel F in the market. Sales for the Channel F, which had never been great, were just like they slumped. If you were going to buy a games console at that time, you bought the Atari. Fairchild responded to this with a redesign. They came up with the Channel F Series 2, which is what you see here. It's got a simpler, more modern looking case. They did away with the plastic lid, basically, and moved the holder for the controllers, which had been stored sort of around here, moved them to the back. They did away with the internal speaker. Sound now comes out of the TV. And the controllers are also now unpluggable. So if they break, you can replace them without having to unwire the whole thing. Trouble is, all of these changes, though they made the system look a lot better, were entirely cosmetic. They completely failed to address the fact that the Atari was just plain better. It got better sound, better graphics, better games. This, coupled with the fact that the Channel F was coming to market during the first video games crash. This is where everyone had bought Pong. Everyone was sick of it. No one wanted to play video games anymore because they just assumed they were crap. So it came to market in the middle of that crash. Things were not going well. Then in '79, Fairchild, who really were struggling, they were bought out by an oil field services company called Schlumberger Limited. They had no interest whatsoever in the video games business and sold the Channel F to a digital watch maker called Zircon International or Zircon Corporation, take your pick. They released the system too and licensed it to various companies around the world. So they sold it themselves in the US and then around Europe and wherever. Different manufacturers sold it. As you can see here, Adman Grandstand sold it in the UK. They were a company, if you've seen Chipsturs' video, you'll know something about this. Grandstand were a company who, back in the late 70s, early 80s, they licensed gaming hardware from various companies, mostly American, possibly some Japanese. Sold them over here, rebranded as Grandstand. You know, tabletop games, video games consoles. If you've seen my video of the SD070, you'll know the kind of thing I'm talking about. They were largely fairly crap, but they were cheap, and lots of people bought them. In all, 26 game cartridges were produced between 1976 and 1981. 21 of those were published by Fairchild, with the remainder being released during Zircon's ownership, though some, if not all of these, have been developed by Fairchild before they sold off the system. There are 2 games built into the console as well. You've got Pong and Hockey, so even if you manage to get hold of one of these consoles, don't have any cartridges to go with it, you can still play games on it. It plays a pretty decent game of Pong. Better, I might add, to the Pong cartridge on the Atari 2600. I've got that, and I have to say that's quite rubbish. Pong on here is better. The Channel F was the first system, in fact I don't know what other systems used it, to use the Fairchild F8 CPU. This was a complex little beast. It was 8-bit, but unlike pretty much every other CPU you could name, it came on 2 chips. Reason for this being, Fairchild couldn't find the right packaging. They couldn't find anything with the right number of pinouts to cover all the registers and whatever in the F8 architecture, so they had to split it between 2 chips and have them running in tandem somehow. It runs at 1.79 megahertz, or if you're fortunate enough to have a PAL machine, 2 megahertz, which is very nice. It's only got 64 bytes of RAM, so I mean that's half of what you got on the Atari 2600. But nevertheless, the CPU was the first on a home console to be able to implement pretty basic AI on its games. So it was the first system where you could play against the computer rather than player versus player, which at the time was very cool, though it wasn't always great in terms of gameplay, but it was a first. Graphics, yeah, it could only produce sprites of 1 colour out of a total of 8 colours and at a resolution of 128 by 164, though with only 102 by 58 pixels actually visible, so pretty limited stuff. Audio, 1 channel, 500 megahertz to 1 kilohertz, 1.5 kilohertz. Things like that don't mean an awful lot to me. I don't know about you. What I can tell you is it basically sounds like Pong. Yep, the audio on this is rubbish. It's completely rubbish. Beaten totally by the Atari, hands down, no competition. The Magnavox Odyssey 2 Philips video pack also completely stuffs this in terms of audio. It just sounds like you're playing Pong. Now, the controllers, these are just way funky. So you've got 8-way up, down, left, right diagonals, which is as you would expect. But then you've got rotation as well, a little bit like the paddle controller on the Atari. But then fire control, push and pull, which is great. I mean, that is one very clever piece of kit. We got the buttons on the front here, power there, reset there, time mode, hold and start, fairly self-explanatory, though I do know that when I have tried them on the games I didn't altogether know what I was doing, but that's largely down to me not reading the instructions. Nothing unusual there. Games for the system. Originally, when the system was new, they come in really nice bright boxes like this, and they were numbered from 1 to 26, give or take. The later ones came in very plain boxes and were only available for mail order and didn't come in these funky bright boxes. Cartridges look like that. Great, I mean that's humongous. Compared with an Atari cartridge, it's pretty enormous. And they plug in the front there, like so, and then to take them out, you press that. If you're interested in seeing what games for the system look like, there are some videos on my YouTube channel. They will also be embedded on my website in due course, so there will be a link at the bottom of this page on my website to the videos when that part is completed. So there you have it, Fairchild Channel F. Not the greatest of systems, but historically very interesting. Thank you for watching. So there you have it, Fairchild Channel F. Bollocks.